The alien throne room was larger than any cathedral on Earth. Its walls pulsed with a strange green light, as if alive. Shadows moved across the high ceiling. Guards with armored scales stood in silence, their spears glowing with energy. And at the center, on a throne carved from the bones of ancient beasts, sat the queen. She was 8 feet tall. Her skin shimmered with a silver glow, her eyes sharp like blades of ice. Every step she took echoed like thunder, every glance filled with power. The court around her bent low in fear. They called her invincible. They called her eternal. None dared speak above a whisper when she entered. That day, the guards dragged a single human into her presence. His wrists were bound with chains. His uniform was torn, his face bruised, yet his eyes remained steady. He walked without stumbling, even though every alien eye burned with hatred at his presence. The queen leaned forward, her lips curling into a cruel smile. She studied him as one might study an insect that somehow survived the crushing boot. Her voice rang out, deep and mocking. So this is a human. The species that fights with fragile bodies and fragile weapons. You dare invade our stars, and yet you are nothing. Her court laughed, the sound sharp and cold. The hall shook with their amusement. The man did not answer. He lifted his head and met her gaze. His silence was not fear. It was defiance. The queen narrowed her eyes. She expected begging, or rage, or even tears. Instead, she saw something else. Resolve. You are small, she continued, circling him slowly. Her towering shadow fell across his face. Your bones break with a touch. Your skin burns in our atmosphere. Your heart will not last a day in my world. And yet you stare at me as if you are my equal. The human spoke at last. His voice was steady, though quiet. Because I am. The laughter of the court rose again, louder this time, crueler. But the queen stopped. Her head tilted slightly, her smile fading. She had expected arrogance or desperation. But the calm certainty in his voice unsettled her. She stepped closer, her towering frame inches from his face. You think yourself worthy of me? A human, little more than prey, daring to stand tall before my throne. The soldier did not blink. I think myself worthy of life. And that is something your people do not understand. The room grew silent. For the first time in memory, no one dared to laugh. The guards shifted nervously, waiting for the queen's wrath. But she did not strike him. Instead, she threw back her head and laughed, a sound that shook the walls. It was not the laughter of joy. It was the laughter of someone who could not believe the courage before her eyes. Breed with a human, she said, still laughing. What a ridiculous idea! A fragile creature like you could never survive my touch, much less share my bloodline. The court roared again with cruel amusement. The human said nothing. He simply looked at her with the same calm strength, unshaken by her words. The queen's laughter faded slowly. She studied him again, more carefully this time. His body was weak compared to her kind, but his spirit was something she had not seen in any of her warriors. He did not kneel. He did not break. Curiosity crept into her heart, though she would not admit it aloud. Instead, she raised her hand, silencing the room. Do not kill him, she commanded. Keep him alive. I want to see how long this little flame will burn before it dies. The guards looked at one another, confused. No human captive had ever been spared. But they obeyed. They dragged him away, chains clinking against the stone floor. The queen watched him go, her eyes narrowed. Something in his calm defiance unsettled her more than any weapon. She did not fear his strength, for he had little. She did not fear his weapons, for they were broken. What she feared was the question rising in her own mind. Why had she spared him? Her court whispered among themselves, confused by her decision. But she ignored them. She sat back on her throne, her silver skin glowing beneath the strange green light, her thoughts restless. In her heart, a spark of curiosity had been lit. And she hated herself for it. The human was taken to the palace prison, but even there he held his head high. The guards muttered that his eyes unsettled them. That he looked at them not with fear, but with something else. As if he already knew something they did not. And far above, in her throne, the queen could not sleep that night. For the image of the human's gaze stayed with her, sharp and unbroken. For the first time in her reign, the queen of 1,000 worlds wondered if humanity, fragile as it seemed, might not be so fragile after all. The prison beneath the alien palace was not a place for survival. The walls pulsed with a faint red glow, alive with heat, as if the stone itself carried blood. Chains hung from the ceiling like the ribs of some great beast. The air was thick, heavy, and made for creatures far stronger than any human lungs. Yet the soldier survived. Every day the guards brought him food that tasted like ash, and water that burned his throat. They expected him to wither, to collapse, to break as all others had. But he did not. His body weakened, but his spirit did not. He learned to breathe slower, to steady his heartbeat, to adapt to the rhythm of the palace itself. Word of his endurance began to spread through the lower halls. Even the guards, who once mocked him, began to watch him in silence. They spoke in whispers, saying the human did not look like prey, saying his eyes held fire. The queen came often. She told herself it was only curiosity. She told her generals it was for study. But when she entered the cell, her gaze lingered on him longer than it should have. He always rose to meet her eyes. Even in chains, even with wounds unhealed, he stood as tall as he could. "You live still," she said one night, her voice echoing through the stone chamber. "Your kind breaks easily, yet you endure. Why?" The soldier's voice was quiet, but firm. "Because I choose to. You cannot take that from me." The queen tilted her head. She had crushed warriors twice his size. She had broken kings and made them crawl at her feet. But this human, with nothing left but chains, dared to speak as if he ruled himself. "You think choice keeps you alive?" she asked. He nodded. "It always has. It always will." Her laughter shook the walls, but this time it carried less mockery. There was a sharp edge of fascination hidden beneath it. After she left, she told herself he was foolish. She told herself he was weak. Yet her thoughts returned to his words long after her throne room had grown quiet. The days stretched into weeks. The queen began visiting more often. Sometimes she brought questions, sometimes only silence. She asked about Earth, about oceans, about fire, about the strange way humans lived short lives yet filled them with such reckless passion. He answered simply. He did not beg, he did not flatter. He spoke as though she were not a queen of galaxies, but simply another being who wished to understand. One night she asked, "Do you not hate me? I destroyed your fleet. I crushed your world's defenses. I keep you here as nothing more than an animal." The soldier looked at her with steady eyes. "I hate what you do. But hate you? No. You laugh, you mock, but you are searching. You do not kill me, because part of you wonders what it means to be human." Her chest tightened at his words. She could have struck him down, silenced him forever. Yet she did not. She turned away, her silver skin catching the red glow of the prison walls, and left without another word. But his voice followed her long after she had gone. As the whispers grew in the court above, tension also grew. Generals questioned her judgment. Why was this human kept alive? Why did she waste her presence in the dungeons, when wars raged beyond the stars? The queen silenced them with a single command. But in the quiet of her chamber, she found herself unsettled. The human was not just surviving. He was changing something in her. She had seen thousands of species bow, beg, or die. Yet here was one man who refused all three. He was weaker in flesh, but stronger in spirit. And that strength, invisible yet undeniable, drew her back to his cell again and again. One evening, when the air outside roared with storms of burning light, she entered the prison without her guards. The soldier sat against the wall, his chains clinking softly as he shifted. "You do not fear me," she said, her voice lower than before. He met her eyes. "Fear is a choice too. I choose not to." The queen felt a heat rise within her chest. For the first time in centuries, she did not know what to say. She turned to leave, but paused. "Why do you look at me as if I am not your enemy?" she asked. The human's answer was simple. "Because enemies are temporary. But truth lasts." Her hand trembled slightly as she left the cell. The guards outside saw nothing, but inside her heart, a seed had been planted. A seed she could neither ignore nor remove. And deep in the shadows of the prison, the soldier closed his eyes. He knew he had touched something in her. He did not know if it would save him or destroy him, but he knew one thing for certain. The Queen of 1,000 Worlds was no longer laughing at him. She was listening. The palace was never silent. Its walls hummed with the voices of advisors, generals, and ministers. But in recent weeks, their voices carried more anger than obedience. The whispers of rebellion had begun. At the center of it all was one question. Why was the human still alive? The generals gathered in the Queen's hall. They stood tall, armored in black steel, eyes burning with defiance. One stepped forward, a warlord whose claws had torn through dozens of worlds. His voice rang with fury. "My queen, we demand answers. The human is a threat. He is weak, yes, but his weakness poisons the court. Guards whisper of him. Servants watch him. You waste time in his cell while empires challenge us beyond the stars." The others growled in agreement. Their spears slammed against the floor like thunder. The queen sat still upon her throne, her silver eyes cold and unblinking. She let their anger wash over her without reaction. Then, slowly, she rose. The hall grew silent. "You think his life is weakness?" she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "You think sparing him makes me lesser?" The warlord bowed his head, but not low enough. "Yes, my queen. Mercy is not our way. And this human, he looks at you as if he is your equal. It insults your crown." The queen stepped closer until her shadow swallowed him whole. "Then perhaps it is not my crown that is insulted. Perhaps it is your pride." Gasps filled the chamber. The warlord stiffened, but dared not reply. She dismissed them all with a single gesture. Her word was final. But the tension did not vanish. It grew. That night, she returned to the prison. The human was waiting, as though he had sensed the storm in her court. His chains rattled when he stood. "They want me dead," he said. "They always wanted you dead," she replied. Her tone was sharp, but her eyes softened when they met his. "Then why am I alive?" She did not answer right away. She studied him, her thoughts heavy. Finally she spoke. "Because you are different. You do not kneel. You do not break. Even in chains you are whole. My generals do not understand it. Even I do not fully understand it." The human smiled faintly. "Maybe you keep me alive because you want to." The queen's chest tightened at his words. She wanted to strike him for his boldness, yet her hand would not move. Instead, she turned away. "Do not mistake my curiosity for mercy." But in her heart, she knew it was more than curiosity. The days grew darker. The warlords grew restless. They gathered outside the prison, demanding the queen end the human's life. The court's laughter had turned to fear. Some believed the human spirit was a curse, others whispered it was a prophecy. The queen made her choice. She called for a public trial. Not a trial of words, but of strength. If the human could stand against the champion of her people, his fate would be decided. The court gathered in the arena beneath the palace. Thousands of eyes glowed in the dark, waiting for the spectacle. The human was unchained for the first time in weeks. His body was weak, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. The champion stepped forward. A beast of muscle and armor, towering even taller than the queen. His claws dripped with venom, his teeth bared in hunger. The court cheered, certain of the human's death. The queen sat upon her throne, her heart a storm of conflict. She told herself this was justice. She told herself it was order. But as the human walked into the arena, her chest tightened with something else. Fear. The battle began. The champion charged, his claws striking like lightning. The human moved aside, barely fast enough, the air hissing where the strike had been. He could not match strength. He could not match speed. But he could endure. Blow after blow rained down, but he rose again each time. His body bent, but did not break. His blood spilled, but his eyes never wavered. The court shouted in disbelief, their laughter turning into silence. The queen's hands gripped her throne until her claws dug deep into the bone. She wanted to look away, yet she could not. At last, the human fell to one knee, chest heaving. The champion roared in victory, raising his claws for the final strike. But the human rose again. His voice carried across the arena, broken yet unshaken. "You can tear my body apart, but you will never have my spirit." The words struck harder than any weapon. Even the champion faltered for a moment. The queen rose from her throne, her voice shattering the silence. "Enough!" The arena froze. The human collapsed, bloody but alive. The champion growled, but lowered his claws under her command. The queen descended into the arena herself, every step echoing like thunder. She stood before the human, towering above him, her silver eyes blazing. "Do you see now?" she shouted to the court. "This is why he lives. This is why I keep him. His body is weak, but his will is stronger than any of you. And that is what makes him dangerous. That is what makes him worthy." The court trembled in silence. None dared laugh. None dared speak. She turned to the human, her gaze softer now, her voice almost a whisper. "You are still alive! And as long as I command it, you will remain so." The arena shook with the echo of her words. And in that moment, the bond between the queen and the human grew stronger than chains, stronger than fear. The court had witnessed the impossible. A human had defied death in the heart of the alien empire. And their queen, once mocking his kind, now stood as his protector. But in the shadows, the warlords whispered darker plans. The arena had fallen silent after the queen's command. The human was taken back to the prison, bloody but alive. The court dispersed, some shaken, some angry, and some whispering in awe. But the queen did not rest that night. She stood on the balcony of her chambers, the storm-lit skies stretching above her empire. Lightning tore through the clouds. Her eyes, silver and sharp, stared into the distance, yet her thoughts were trapped in the dungeon below. Why had she stopped the fight? Why had she spared him again? She told herself it was for control, for order. But the truth pressed harder in her heart. It was not just defiance she had seen in him. It was something she had never seen in her own kind. He had fallen again and again. Yet he rose, bleeding, broken, but unshaken. That stubborn fire pulled at her in ways she could not name. Her court could not know this. Her generals would never understand. But she understood. The next night, she descended into the prison alone. Her guards offered to follow, but she dismissed them. The heavy door closed behind her, leaving only the soft glow of the red walls and the sound of chains. The human sat against the wall. His wounds were still fresh, but his eyes lifted when she entered. Even in pain, his gaze held steady. "You came back," he said softly. The queen crossed the chamber, her steps slow, deliberate. She studied him in silence before speaking. "You should be dead. No other creature has endured what you did. Not even my strongest." The human gave a faint smile. "Maybe your strongest fight with their bodies. Humans fight with something else." Her head tilted. "What is that?" "Our will." His words lingered in the chamber like fire in the cold. The queen found herself sitting on the stone bench across from him. Something she had never done with any prisoner. She asked him questions. Why humans risked everything for family. Why they fought wars when their chances were small. Why they loved so deeply, even though their lives were short. His answers were simple, yet they carried a weight her people had forgotten. "Because every moment matters," he said. "Because when we care for someone, we give more than our strength. We give our lives. Even if they are brief." The queen sat in silence. His words pierced her more deeply than any blade. She looked at him not as prey, not as a prisoner, but as something far more dangerous. A mirror. For centuries she had conquered, ruled, and crushed. She was feared across the stars. Yet she realized, as she sat across from him, that she had never truly been seen. And this human, broken and chained, looked at her as though he saw not a monster, but a woman. Her breath caught. She rose quickly, hiding the tremor in her voice. You speak as if your weakness is strength. He met her gaze without flinching. Maybe it is. That night she did not sleep. She dreamed of him instead. Dreams of fire, of oceans, of laughter she had never known. Days turned into nights, and nights into weeks. She visited him more often. Sometimes with questions, sometimes only to sit in silence. Each time she told herself it was the last. Each time she returned again. One evening she came without her crown, without her armor. She stood before him not as a queen, but as herself. You are dangerous, she said. The human tilted his head. Why? Because you change me. Her voice trembled, though she forced it steady. I have crushed empires without doubt. Yet one human makes me question myself. He looked at her, his eyes softer now. Then maybe you are not changing. Maybe you are only remembering who you were meant to be. The silence between them grew heavy. For the first time in her reign, she felt something stronger than fear, stronger than power. She felt the pull of something she had always denied. Her hand lifted before she could stop it, brushing lightly against his face. His skin was warm beneath her cold silver fingers. He did not flinch. He did not look away. In that moment, the Queen of 1,000 Worlds felt small. And she found she did not hate it. She pulled back quickly, her breath sharp. This cannot be, she whispered. My people would tear me apart. The human's voice was steady, gentle. Sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. Her heart pounded as she turned and left the chamber, her footsteps quick against the stone. But even as she fled, his words burned inside her. The court outside grew restless. The generals plotted in shadows. They spoke of betrayal, of weakness, of a queen who had lost her fire. But they did not see the truth. The truth was that her fire had never burned brighter. It was no longer the fire of conquest. It was something new. Something far more dangerous. For the first time, the queen did not only rule. She felt. And in the silence of the dungeon, the human closed his eyes. He knew the turning point had come. The queen was no longer his captor. She was becoming something far greater, and far more fragile. The alien palace had never known such silence. For weeks, the court whispered like restless shadows. Servants hushed their voices when the queen passed. Generals looked at her with narrowed eyes, suspicion burning behind their bows. The reason was simple. The queen was changing. She visited the human more often now, sometimes in secret, sometimes without excuse. At first, she told herself it was curiosity. Then she told herself it was strategy. But the truth pressed harder every day. It was no longer curiosity. It was desire. The whispers spread like fire through the court. Some said the queen was bewitched. Others said she had lost her mind. But no one dared say it to her face. Her power still crushed their fear, though cracks had begun to form in their loyalty. One night, when the twin moons burned bright through the palace windows, the queen dismissed her guards and walked alone to the dungeon. Her steps were quiet, her crown absent. She moved not as a ruler, but as a woman seeking something she could no longer deny. The human was waiting. He stood when she entered, though his body was still scarred from the arena. His eyes softened when they met hers. You should rest, she said. He shook his head. I cannot rest when I know you are troubled. Her heart tightened. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Her own people feared her too much to see her as anything but a weapon. Yet this man, fragile and broken, looked at her as if she were more than her throne, more than her crown. The queen stepped closer. Do you not fear me any more? His answer was simple. I never did. Her chest ached at his words. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as it touched his cheek. His warmth spread into her fingers, burning through her cold armor of pride. "You are dangerous," she whispered. "Only if you let yourself feel," he replied. And she did. The silence between them cracked. What began as curiosity had grown into something impossible to hide. She leaned forward, her silver skin glimmering in the red glow of the prison walls. Her lips met his, hesitant at first, then fierce with a hunger she had long denied. The chains clinked softly as his arms pulled her closer, as if even iron could not keep them apart. For the first time in her reign, the queen felt vulnerable, and she welcomed it. When she pulled away, her breath trembled. Her eyes, sharp and cold to all others, now burned with something softer. "This cannot be known," she said. "If my people see this, they will rise against me." He nodded. "Then let it be ours alone. For now." But secrets in the palace were never safe. The guards noticed her longer visits. Servants whispered of her leaving the dungeon with eyes brighter than when she entered. Generals whispered louder, calling her bond with the human a betrayal of their empire. The warlords gathered in the shadows, plotting her fall. Still, she returned to him. Again and again. Each night their bond grew stronger. They spoke not only of battles and survival, but of dreams. He told her of Earth's oceans, of rain that smelled of life, of skies that glowed with dawn. She told him of stars he had never seen, of worlds she had conquered, of the loneliness that ruled her heart. In the darkness of the dungeon, they became more than queen and captive. They became two souls who found in each other what they could never find alone. Yet danger grew closer with each passing day. One evening, a trusted adviser entered her chamber, bowing low but speaking with trembling voice. "My queen, forgive me, but your court sees too much. They speak of betrayal. They say you spend your nights with the human. If this spreads beyond the palace, you will lose everything." The queen's eyes blazed. "Let them speak. Let them whisper. None have the courage to face me." But in her heart, she knew it was not so simple. The empire she had built on fear was beginning to shake. That night, she returned to the dungeon once more. The human saw the storm in her eyes before she spoke. "They plot against me," she said. "They think me weak because I choose you. They do not understand." He stepped closer, though chains still bound his wrists. "Then let them fear you. Not because of what you take from them, but because of what you protect." Her chest rose with heavy breath. "And what do I protect?" "Us," he said. The words struck her harder than any blade. She felt its weight, its danger, its truth. She pressed her forehead against his, closing her eyes. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like a queen, nor a conqueror. She felt human. And though the palace above whispered rebellion, though her empire balanced on the edge of war, she knew there was no turning back. The forbidden bond had been sealed. The queen of 1,000 worlds, feared and worshipped across the stars, had given her heart to a human. And nothing, not her generals, not her enemies, not even the galaxy itself, would ever undo it. The palace air grew heavier with each passing day. Whispers had turned into storms. The warlords no longer hid their anger. The queen's bond with the human was no longer rumor. It was truth. And truth, in an empire built on fear, was dangerous. But the queen ignored them. Her thoughts no longer belonged to her throne. They belonged to him. At night, when shadows covered the palace, she returned to him. Each visit broke another wall around her heart. She told herself she was strong enough to balance love and power. She told herself no one could challenge her rule. Yet something within her began to change. Something she could not control. It began with small signs. Her body, once flawless and unshaken, grew restless. Her strength surged wildly, yet her focus faltered. Her breath came heavier at times, her heart faster, her nights longer. She dismissed it as stress, as exhaustion, as the burden of empire. But then the truth arrived. The healers were called when her strength collapsed in the council hall. Generals rushed to her side, their whispers sharp with fear. She was carried into her private chamber, where the healers examined her in silence. When they finished, their eyes would not meet hers. Their hands trembled as they knelt before her. "My queen," one whispered, "forgive us. But you are not ill. You are with child." The chamber froze. The generals who had followed into the hall stiffened in shock. Their eyes widened, their voices rose in chaos. "A child?" one snarled. "Impossible. Our queen carries no heir. She never has." But the healer's voice cracked with truth. "It is no ordinary child. It is not pure blood of our kind. It carries human life within it." The hall erupted. Warlords shouted of blasphemy. Ministers cried of betrayal. The court split between terror and fury. The queen rose slowly, her silver eyes burning. Her body shook, but not with weakness. With fury. "Silence," she commanded. Her voice thundered through the chamber, cutting through their cries like a blade. The court fell into trembling silence. The queen stood tall, her hands trembling only for a moment before she clenched them into fists. "You call it blasphemy. You call it weakness. But you are blind. This child is not weakness. This child is power." The warlords glared, their teeth bared in rage. "A half-blood. A mistake. A curse that will destroy us all." She stepped forward, her towering frame casting them into shadow. "No. This child will save us. It is proof that even the smallest flame can burn brighter than the largest star. Proof that humanity is not weak, but strong enough to change even me." The generals recoiled, their pride shaken by her words. But their whispers did not stop. The court had been poisoned with doubt. That night, the queen returned to the dungeon, her steps slower than before. She stood before the human, her heart torn between fear and strength. He saw it in her eyes before she spoke. "You are carrying life," he said softly. She froze, her breath sharp. "How did you know?" "Because I see it in you. The way you change. The way you hold yourself. You are not only a queen anymore. You are a mother." Her chest tightened at his words. She had never allowed herself to imagine such a thing. For centuries she had ruled with steel and fire, never with love. And now, within her, grew something impossible. "I should be afraid," she whispered. "Then be afraid," he said. "But do not be ashamed. This child is ours. It is hope, not weakness." Her eyes burned with tears she had not shed in centuries. She knelt before him, her hands cupping his face. "Do you know what you have done? You have changed me. You have changed everything. The galaxy will hunt us for this. My own people will rise against me." He leaned forward, his voice steady. "Then let them rise. We will not bow." The silence stretched between them, heavy with truth. She kissed him again, fiercer than before, as if the entire galaxy could not tear them apart. Above them, in the great halls, the Empire trembled. Generals gathered in secret, plotting rebellion. Ministers whispered of civil war. Enemies across the stars heard rumors of the Queen's fall and sharpened their blades. The child within her was not yet born, but already it had changed the galaxy. The Queen rose from the dungeon with fire in her eyes. She stood before her throne and declared to her court, "You will not call this child a mistake. You will not call it weakness. You will call it the future." The hall shook with her voice. Yet even as she spoke, she saw their eyes. She saw rebellion burning in their silence. Her empire stood on the edge of war. But she no longer stood alone. The Queen stood before her throne, silver skin gleaming in the dim green glow of the hall. Around her, the court trembled in silence. None dared speak after her declaration. None dared look at her directly. Yet, in their silence she heard it. Fear. Hatred. Rebellion. The child in her womb was not yet born, but it had already split her empire in two. Some whispered of prophecy, that this union between human and queen would bring a new age. Others cursed it as the end of their glory, a stain on their blood. The Queen's voice thundered through the chamber once more. "Let the galaxy laugh, as I once laughed. Let them call it weakness. Let them call it blasphemy. I tell you, this child is power. It is the bridge between worlds. It is the fire that cannot be put out. Her words echoed like thunder, but she saw their eyes. Warlords and generals bent their heads, not in loyalty, but in calculation. They would wait. They would plot. They would strike. And she knew it. That night, she returned to the dungeon. The human waited for her, chains still binding his wrists, though they no longer seemed like chains at all. His eyes lit when she entered, and she felt the weight of the day fall away. They know, she said simply. He nodded. And now everything changes. She lowered herself beside him, pressing her forehead to his. They will come for us. My people, my enemies, even the stars themselves. They will come for this child. Then let them, he whispered. We will not break. Her heart swelled. For the first time in her long reign, she did not feel alone against the galaxy. She had conquered thousands of worlds, yet this one man gave her more strength than any army. But outside, the galaxy moved quickly. In the outer sectors, rival empires gathered. Alien kings and queens whispered of war, of seizing the throne while it wavered. Some believed the queen had betrayed her people. Others feared the child she carried. Fear was more dangerous than any weapon, and fear spread faster than light. Inside her palace, the warlords plotted. They gathered in dark halls, their voices sharp with fury. She is weak, one spat. She carries the blood of prey in her womb. If she cannot be replaced, then she must be destroyed. Yet among the lower halls, among the guards and servants, other whispers grew. Some spoke not of rebellion, but of wonder. They had seen the human in the arena, bloodied yet unbroken. They had seen the queen's fire grow brighter since his arrival. And they wondered if perhaps the impossible was not weakness, but hope. The empire stood on the edge of war. The queen felt the weight of it in every breath. Yet when she stood before the human, she felt unshaken. His hand in hers was strength enough to face the stars. One night, as the storm outside the palace roared, she asked him softly, "Do you regret it? Knowing what we have done? Knowing what we have brought into this galaxy?" He shook his head. "No. Because what we have is the truth. And truth is worth every battle." She kissed him then, not as a queen, but as a woman who had found her equal. And though rebellion brewed, though enemies sharpened their blades, though her own court burned with doubt, she rose taller than ever before. When dawn came, she stood before her empire again. Her voice carried across the throne room, echoing into every corner of her realm. "You will not hide behind fear," she declared. "You will not bury your heads in shame. This child is mine. This child is human. This child is alien. And this child is the future of us all." Her generals bowed, but their silence spoke louder than words. Her warlords glared, their eyes burning with revolt. Yet none dared defy her in that moment. The galaxy laughed, as she had once laughed. But her laughter now was not mockery. It was triumph. The human, once a prisoner, now stood beside her, his head high. No chains could bind him any more. The child within her was yet to be born, but already it had changed the stars. Already it had drawn the attention of empires, the hatred of warlords, and the hope of the powerless. The queen of 1,000 worlds had made her choice. And the galaxy would never be the same.